it's a reasonably serious topic today, so I thought I would start with a little news for ourselves, but that both our environment and our deeper nature is calling us into. So this whole frame is a way of kind of helping understand what's going on, and therefore embrace it and give consent to it, and understand that this isn't just something visited upon us, that this is actually an initiatory process, and we're right in the middle of it. So I want to start with politics. First of all, the idea of what is politics, and if politics is going to change, then the system it may change from inside the system, but it's much more likely to change from outside. I know for me, the first time I listened to my parliament in the country that I live in, New Zealand, I turned on at maybe like 16 or 17, and I had my first listen to the parliament, and I was frankly totally shocked at that this was leadership on the planet. Like, for me, the analogy would be like if we were children in a dysfunctional family, and we had one parent in charge for 4 years. So dad's in charge, and he's teaching us all about self-responsibility and discipline. And the whole time that he's in charge, mom is undermining him. She's cutting him down. She's arguing with him. She's harassing him. She's hiring, manipulators and people to convince the kids that he's an idiot. And then 4 years later, she's in charge, and she's in charge for 4 years. And all of that time, he's undermining her and cutting her down and arguing with her. And so this is supposed to be a political system or a leadership system that has some kind of integrity and love at the core, when basically it's an argument between ideologies. So this has been passed to us from the British political system. Thank you, Britain. But it's all over the world, this adversarial political system, which is supposed to produce results that help us, follow guidance. And of course, what politics ultimately is what's your prime directive? What's important? What are the values? What are the principles that should guide our collective evolution? So if we have a political system that is fundamentally flawed, in the same way that we have an economic system that's based on debt. So part of decentralizing the economic system is to create what's being done with cryptocurrencies and all other kinds of ways to get rid of the inbuilt bias that's in our economic system, which forces us to make a living and forces us to deal with debt, and has resulted in this huge debt in the world. So we all have a political system that is just as deeply flawed, and the political system and the economic system are deeply interwoven. So, we're going to get into some of the particulars of what's going on in the world at the moment, but it doesn't need us to take sides in the whole COVID thing and the whole vaccination issue and so on, to see that there are these two sides, that there is deep collusion between our political system and our economic system and big pharma and all of those other things, which makes people feel powerless. And that the political system of having a vote once every 4 years and thinking that your vote counts, and assuming that you as an individual in the greater collective, somehow your vote is helping. We all know that creates a deep experience of powerlessness. So the system of politics is deeply flawed. The way that it's run, how it's run, its integration in with business, its integration in with ideology, creates a schizophrenic society where we are in left brain and then right brain. We are in gender wars. We're in polarity. We're in duality. We're arguing between the dualities. And, often what happens is, as a political party spends the first 2 years in office, and they are, trying to countermand everything that was done in the last 2 years of the last party. And then the next 2 years, they create new things. And then after that, then they get undermined by the next party in power. And then because you have a party, and because you have votes, and because you have the need to get votes and to influence people and to tell them what to think, then you have a system that has left many people and a whole generation of young people on the planet just not wanting anything to do with leadership as we currently know it in our political system. And so if we are undergoing a change, and that change is primarily a shift between leadership from the head, leadership from ideology, leadership from the politics of mind, into a deep leadership in the heart, we've got a shift in power and what power means and where power comes from. So just as cryptocurrency decentralizes finance, how do we decentralize power? And that decentralization of power means we have to redefine what power is and how it plays out in our political lives. So one of the ways that it's decentralized is through personal power. So political power is systemic power, voted in power, and party power is something that the heart and soul of humanity is kind of done with. And you could read things like Brexit and Trump's election and other things of saying, look, we don't want politics as usual. We're even willing to have crazy, chaotic experiences because we don't want the system. And somewhere deep inside humanity, we know we're being fucked over. And we know that a political system is creating this deep powerlessness and creating the generation that is going to have to change in order to even protect the biosphere. So we kind of know this, it's deep in our gnosis of our heart, but people feel powerless. So one of the ways that politics is changing is personal power. And where personal power comes from is the direct alignment with values and principles. And so we've always had examples of personal power, people like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or, John Lennon or like people or JFK, people who had some alignment, deep integrity, listened to what was true for them and followed that even to the point of their own death or to the point of, social isolation or whatever it was, but they were using personal power, not political power. So that's one way that power is shifting in the planet as everybody has access to a lot more sources of information and they're starting to feel into where is it that they are experiencing leadership. If they're not experiencing leadership from elected officials, where is leadership showing up on the planet? And so as individuals sound their note of personal power and express their truths that come from their own direct alignment, then people are starting to resonate with that. So and one way of decentralizing political power is that people will begin to follow and resonate with and respond to different kinds of leadership on the planet. And already you can see that happening, whether it's people following on Twitter or whether they're, reading blogs or whatever, they're starting to tune into where does my being resonate? What kind of leadership do I resonate with? And how do I align myself with that and help me stand up for what matters to me and is true to me? So that's one way, is the decentralizing of political power to personal power. And this is going to be a big shift over the next decade, because as people realize that the naive relying on governance and voting once a year in order to solve the big issues in front of us is not going to work, then they're going to look for blame and they're going to look for whose fault it is, who fucked it up. And basically it comes down to personal empowerment. How are you showing up in your life? If you want leadership on the outside, who leads inside you? Who makes the decisions? Where do you make the decisions from? And then the last way that it's going to come is what I would call transpersonal power. So in one of my last books, I talked about the change on the planet is not going to come through education and debate. It's not going to come through convincing people that this truth is more truthful than that truth. Real political change is going to come on the planet as a result of the revelation of divine power. And so what is divine power, and how does that show up in human beings? Well, it's not centered in the individual. Okay, so personal power is still centered in the individual. This guy, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, this person, now they're our leader. We don't trust the leaders that we have, so we're going to shift our souls and our hearts towards affiliation with people that are expressing the leadership that we resonate with. So that's the first move. But transpersonal leadership is not centered in the individual. It's not centered in this person. It's like individual leaders, people who are genuine leaders, who are able to contact their essential divinity to align with God and Goddess. They are like lightning rods. Those lightning rods often get hit by lightning. That often, in a storm, lightning often hits a lightning rod, because a leader is, in an electrical term, someone who sends up a current of plasma into a lightning storm. All things do, trees do, steeples do. They send up plasma leaders, and those leaders can get hit by lightning. And so when somebody is inspired, when the soul of the world, the soul of a nation, their own soul is deeply moving them, then they become electrified. Lightning is one of the symbols of transpersonal power. It's the energy that when it strikes, you recognize it. And part of the transpersonal power is it may strike some people more often, because they're lightning chasers. They've got their leader up. They go looking for lightning. But the lightning is not the lightning rod. So power then is not centralized in an individual. That individual power, that personal power, is a prerequisite for divine power, but it's not the divine power. So as we decentralize power in politics, we'll start to tune in not to the lightning rods, not just to the individuals who inspire us and electrify us with their alignment. We'll tune into the lightning itself. We'll tune into the source of transpersonal power in the world, the soul of the world, and we'll see where that's landing. And the great thing about that is that you can put lightning rods in prison, but you can't put lightning in prison. Lightning is going to break forth wherever it can. And as we have a global population of people that are waking up and they're more inspired, then that lightning is going to keep hitting and it's going to keep moving. So the electrical term for lightning is being in charge. So being in charge is going to move from a person being in charge, dad or mom or the prime minister or someone, to charge itself. To be in charge is to be lit up, to be inspired, to be channeling a divine power. That is lightning. And that lightning, if we start to become sensitive to that rather than to the individual that's bringing it forward, we'll listen for it. We'll have our senses up. We'll feel where that lightning is striking. Maybe it'll come through this person this day, in this country, in this thing. So divine power, change coming through the revelation of divine power, is not predictable, understood change. It's change that's got miracle in it, that's got suddenness in it, that's got coming through the cracks, things unexpected, because it's the revelation of a deeper order of being striking through human beings. And that's why the change can come fast, because it doesn't require turning everybody into an experiment, and it doesn't require getting the level of consciousness up for everybody and educating everybody to the same level of understanding so that they all agree about something. So this piece is a difference between uniformity. So uniformity is one form. And when you have one form, then that's the attempt to make everybody think the same, make everybody do the same. Like it's one of the misuses of power that is applicable when people think they are their body mind. Let's make everybody the same. And then there's unanimous. The whole idea of unanimity is one mind, or anima is not really the soul, spiritus is more the soul, but it's supposed to be one soul, but it's not. It means one mind. And what one mind means is, if we all agree together spontaneously, that's unanimous. But what politics does is it tries to argue two sides of a point of view, and it tries to have one side dominate the other.
So the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, they're bent on dominating each other, being right and the other person wrong. So most of that politics that's adversarial sets up an ideological battle. And it's very difficult to avoid that because things piss you off and you have opinions and you have belief systems, and it's very easy to get into an ideological battle. But there's a deeper power that unifies us underneath unanimous one mind, which is very hard to get because minds have very different perspectives and they can argue anything, is what I would call unicore, is the one heart. For politics to move from mind to heart, we need to respond with a deep gnosis of the heart. Core is the heart, uni is one. So maybe when we respond to as one heart, then we become unicorns. Maybe the idea of listening deeply as one being to the spirit of what's living underneath the lightning is what will change our politics. So I want to go a little bit more into how you grow the heart to listen to that. But first, the other side of lightning. Lightning is one source of transpersonal power. It's the source of what you might call aligning with the will of God, not in a religious sense, but in a alignment sense that as a human being, you are part of the life force of the universe. And when you can tune into that, that brings gnosis, the direct knowing, the direct vibration of the whole inside the individual. But the other source of divine power is down in matter. It's the serpent, it's Kundalini, it's what comes up in ayahuasca, it's what's down hidden in matter, waiting for the soul to wake up. So you could say that what will break open that heart so that the heart can listen to real leadership is lightning combined with serpent. That when the lightning is present, when you can send up your leader and you can listen to the will of God, not in a religious sense, but in a great sense of the universe as vibrating intelligence and purpose. And then if you can awaken that serpent and that Kundalini so that energy rises up out of matter and you're informed by the shamanic intelligence of the earth. Now you have lightning and serpent together, and they can crack open like a great defibrillator the heart from the personal heart into the transpersonal heart. And it's the transpersonal heart that will feel leadership. It's the transpersonal heart that will feel the soul of the world. The heart is the organ that of direct knowing, direct gnosis, beyond just mind having a debate about truth, to the knowing of what is right for me, what I resonate with, because my lightning and my serpent are activated and met. So growing the heart is also a requirement to shift it from personal heart. A lot of what we mean by love is personal love, and often that has a sentimentality. So people who are making heart decisions, the reason the head gets to dominate them is because the head can say, well, the heart is immature. The heart is personal based, it's sentimental, it's emotional. We are free of all of that, making clear, scientific, data-based decisions. But the heart is not just the personal heart. This transpersonal heart is connected through love to the whole. It's connected not just to other human beings. It's connected to the living life of Gaia. It's connected to the oceans and the whales and the forests. It's informing itself through the soul of all things. And the soul of all things is connected. And there's a much greater wisdom that the heart can access than the mind can. The mind can understand, but the portion of the universe in its glory that we can understand is so very small. So what we've done is created a world where we now have scientific materialism, our best understanding of a very limited human mind, as the pinnacle to make all of our decisions on. So basically we have politicians backed by business people, backed by pharma, backed by science, trying to make the best mental decision for what's best for everybody, and then trying to convince everybody what that decision is through marketing campaigns, through coercion, through fear, and so on. And they genuinely believe that they are right, that that's the best thing for everybody, and everybody needs to be told what to do, and everybody, should surrender to that because it's the greater good of the greater whole, as the best of our science can understand. Okay, as far as that goes, that's true. It is good to have good mind. It's good to consult good mind. But if you think the mind is the biggest power in the universe, that if you think that our understanding, even our best scientific understanding of hundreds of thousands of years, if you think that that's the pinnacle of the intelligence of the universe, then we're about to be rudely shocked and awakened by the fact that human intelligence is so small in the vast intelligence, not only of the universe, but just of nature, just of the world around us. Our intelligence is so small. And yet the prime directive has been humans are the pinnacle of evolution. We have God-given dominion over nature. We have the top of the food chain, and the quite obvious result, even if you just looked at Earth, is that humans are not necessarily the most intelligent creatures because they're pretty stupidly fucking up the whole biosphere that their life is depending on. And then they are living in denial of that fact so that they can go ahead and get their Nike shoes and buy the next thing and consume and be good little consumers. That's not the behavior of an intelligent species. That's the behavior of a species that's lost connection with source, lost connection with soul, are in denial for that fact, can't actually face that fact, and are then busy distracting themselves with the latest virtual game. That is not intelligence. And if that was, as Monty Python said, let's pray to somewhere up in space, because there's fuck all down here on Earth. That piece of intelligence that we are thinking, that means if we are to be saved, it's not going to be by science and technology or the latest business person or a charismatic leader that tells us what to do. If we're going to be saved by the revelation of the universe and human intelligence, that intelligence will have a part to play. And this isn't like weird stuff. If you go to Einstein, the greatest possible scientist, he said that your bottom line choice, your prime directive, is to think about, do you live in a friendly universe? Like at the end of everything, at the end of understanding everything, do you live in a friendly universe or don't you? And the prime directive that's been driving civilization for the last few thousand years is not only dominion over nature, but it's also survival at all costs, that the most important thing is to survive. And so therefore politicians are elected and drive us from that place, that the most important thing is your survival. But if you live in a friendly universe, then there are much more important things than merely surviving. And this whole idea that we live and have to defend ourselves from nature, and that the only thing between us and death is the cleverness of our brains, is going to shift, because as the heart opens, and as the heart opens transpersonally beyond just our love for ourselves and our neighbors and our friends, when the heart opens to love for the whole of creation, not just the whales and the cute dolphins and so on, but everything, including the universe itself, that love, that heart has an intelligence that our minds will be humbled before. So then, politics of freedom. What is freedom? What is this elusive energy that people will stand up for and die for? You could say the whole history of politics on the planet has been a history of tyranny and then rebellion and then freedom. And in fact, we still control most of our politics. Underneath everything is run by two things: fear of death and threat of death. And the threat of death comes basically, it's hidden now. We don't see it in day-to-day life often, but it's in the military of the superpowers that basically are like, yep, everything's fine. Go ahead, live your life. But if you get too out of hand, we will kill you. Like, that's the bottom line, the threat of death, the threat of military power, the threat of intervention in your lives. That's what unconsciously runs people. And the reason it runs them is because of fear of death, because we fear our own death. And not just the fear of the death of our body, mind, of our personal self, but we fear the death of our civilization, the death of our identity, the death of who we think we are. These are all deaths, and we live in a death-averse society. And as a result of that, death is coming for us. Death is coming, and it's quite obvious that it's coming. It's not just coming through coronavirus. It's coming through, climate change. It's coming through social upheaval. It's coming on a planet where you have 8 billion humans that are, doing a lot to destroy the biosphere around them. It's obviously coming. So how do we meet that? And how do we meet and get beyond it? Because if we haven't faced our death, then we are going to be avoiding it. We're going to be in denial. And if we're going to be in denial, then we're going to look for leaders to reassure us. And then because we want that reassurance is the most important thing, we're going to do what we're told, and we're going to behave because we are hoping that something outside of us will protect us from confronting our own death. And that keeps us enslaved. It's not the politicians that are keeping us enslaved. It's not the evil forces of the world. It's not the great cabals. It's our own fear. It's a bottom line avoidance of confrontation with our mortality, and penetrating through that to find what it is that's worth more at the bottom line than living or dying on the planet. What actually is alive at the core of the human being. And so that takes us on that journey into the heart, the deep journey into what is love. And, it's quite obvious, from an earlier transmission I did, that we're in an educational initiation about what have we learned about love. And we all know the journey of people getting to their deathbed and then realizing, God, a lot of what I did didn't matter. Like, if I have my time over, what really matters is love, whether it's the personal love for my spouse and children or whatever, or whether it's transpersonal love for the planet or the galaxy. It's like so much of life is wasted in survival when at the end we realize it's about love. So at the end of a civilization and a biosphere that's running out of resources with 8 billion people on the planet, headed for a cliff, we get to wake up about what's important. And whether or not this civilization bursts itself into a new civilization will depend upon whether we can make that shift from having our prime directive as fear and survival, or having the prime directive as love. But having the prime directive as love means each person has to do their work, because love is a living, dynamic force in the core of your own being. It isn't an ideology. It's not something that you can understand. And people have different definitions of love. So currently in the world, some people are expressing their love by promoting vaccination because they care about their society around them, and they care about their friends, and they care about their children, and they don't want there to be disease and potential death. So their expression of love is to encourage other people to have the vaccine. Some people's expression of love is to say, no, I don't want this vaccine. I don't believe in it. I don't where it came from. I don't want to be coerced by it. I'm valuing my love for human freedom and the freedom to reject being told what to do by authority. That's another form of love. Some people are saying, well, like, I don't really care about that debate whatsoever. I just care about, growing the things in my garden and the environment beyond, COVID and all of that stuff. That's another expression of love. So each of us, when we are wanting to be led by love rather than by mind, have to like withdraw ourselves from the kind of mental porn of the battle that goes on in the mental plane for your mind, for your attention, for your consciousness, and turn the attention to what is truly alive in the heart. What is love to me? What is love calling me? That's a balance between my personal love, my transpersonal love, and something universal. So I know in my life, when I consider the whole issue of vaccination here in New Zealand that's going for this 90%, I have to consult the personal part of my heart that actually is reluctant to listen to what the deeper levels of my heart say because of the consequences to me. The consequences to me as a personality might mean that I can't travel, which I love to do, that I might not be able to see my father who's aging and not well. And so not being vaccinated may make it much harder to hang out with him, that I might not be able to see my grandchildren, that I might be restricted from all of the things that, the society around me is starting to say. So my personal heart is like, I will be affected. And then if I listen to my transpersonal heart is in an uproar about the issues of freedom that really matter to me as a being, and the issues of no integrity in the political system that is following through on its agenda. So then that part of me is in tension with my personal part. And then when I feel the universal heart in me, then that heart is just clear that the truth for me in my heart is to say no to having vaccination and to say yes to this wisdom inside me. Now, I can come up with reasons for that knowing. I can come up with all kinds of things. I can try to educate other people about those reasons. But at the end of the line, it doesn't matter what the reasons are, because the decision is not coming from a reasoned place. It's not coming from understanding. It's coming from a knowing, a gnosis. And my gnosis will be very different from other people's gnoses, because I'm an individual human being, but I'm connected to the collective. So what divine wisdom does is, from the universal wisdom, it gives you the exact thing that's right for you, that you need to do as a being. It's your inner guidance. It's your deeper than consciousness, the vibration of divinity at the core of your being saying, this is your truth. So this is gnosis. This is the gnosis of the heart, the knowing of the heart. But in order to get it, you do have to wade through those layers of the heart. You have to feel deeply, and not just default to a mental idea or listening to other people's opinions, which doesn't mean you disregard science or disregard the mind. It's just that you take your decision from a deeper level. And that's why freedom is important, because the freedom to decide what's true for you at the core of your being is an inherent part of being an awake human. And defaulting to ideology or to mind or to someone's best view and giving up your gnosis is a giving up of the very thing that's going to be needed for the civilization to come. So freedom is inherent, but it also has layers. Just like the heart has to grow through sentimentality, freedom grows. And in its immature expression, freedom is just basically, fuck you, I'll do what I want. You're not the boss of me. You can see it in a young kid. And a lot of freedom in society is like that. It's just basically rebellion against being told what to do by authority or someone else. So it's an immature form of freedom, but it's still a form of freedom that basically is carrying within it a seed of saying, I'm a sovereign being. And as a sovereign being, I have a right to make choices for myself. Okay, so then that's freedom, and now it intersects with responsibilities. So I'm one individual and there are many individuals and my life affects them and the decisions that I make affects them. So now we're forced into a confrontation with our egocentricity. So when we're egocentric, we put what's best for me at the center. When we begin to grow beyond that into ethnocentric, we put what's good for the tribe or my religion or my people. And then we grow more and we grow into freedom for the collective, for the whole of humanity, beyond left and right, beyond politics and so on. What's at the center is the vibration of freedom for humanity. And then when we grow a little bit bigger, which is what we're going to be forced to do now, we put what is freedom for all life on the planet. You know, where does humanity's desires to survive and prosper and so on deeply intersect with the life of all other beings on the planet? And what is freedom for one has to become freedom for all. So mature freedom is when the freedom for the whole, the good of the whole, is vibrating in the freedom for the individual, so that the freedom for the individual is aligned with the freedom for the whole. And the heart knows that you cannot have your freedom at the expense of someone else's. That freedom is just like love is. It's a divine principle. So most people in the growth to that level of freedom go through the stages of first the ideal, and an ideal has a lot of emotion in it. It's like loyalty. It's like my ideal to this, I'm loyal to my team. And you see this in the political, you know, in New Zealand that they're using it like the team of 5 million, you know, or like we're just one big rugby team cheering ourselves on, you know, like emotionally enrolling ourselves in the game. Okay, so emotionalism works for people who are identity is in their emotions. And then there's ideas, and ideas work for people in their mind. Okay, here's the idea. And you can have on the one side of the idea system is the idea that the best of our sciences and our elected officials are giving this reality. So if you just follow and listen to them, then you don't have to think for yourselves clearly because we're doing the thinking for you. Or you have the other idea that actually all of these people telling you what to do, they're all part of some, you know, agenda that's going to enslave the world, and you're better off like, you know, sourcing all of your information on alternative media and finding out what's going on underneath all of their stuff, and then more ideas. And you can get enrolled in those ideas and you can make a decision from an idea. But if we're going to move into soul leadership individually and collectively, we have to move past ideas. Out beyond that idea of right and wrong is a field. And in that field are principles, are divine laws like gravity. You know, these divine laws are not understanding. They're not limited by our minds. The Earth was going around the center of the galaxy long before we knew it. That's a principle. That's something that is. It's not something that we have discovered and then implemented. It's something that is. So a principle, and these principles in the human soul of love and freedom, they're not ideas. They're not somebody unpacking what love means to them or what freedom means or enshrining it in a constitution. They are living principles that you can feel with your heart. You can feel the principle of love and freedom. That's not just your love and freedom. Just like gravity is not your gravity, it's gravity. Love is, freedom is. These are divine powers. They live inside the human being, but they live in all things. They're part of the matrix of the universe. This is Einstein again. Do you live in a friendly universe? If you do, then you are able to have a direct relationship with that universe and a direct relationship with the principles that make up that universe. So those principles, and there are others, but those are just the two that primarily our civilization is going to be based on. They are living currents of vibration and energy that can be felt in the human heart. So, of course, they need to be translated down through the levels of transpersonal and interpersonal. So each person goes, okay, here's what love and freedom are calling me to. But that's very different from here's what I think. And I'm going to tell you what I think, and I'm going to try to convince you that my thinking is better than your thinking. That's debate. And part of the difficulty of the civilization that we live in is that we think that our minds can come up with the best solution, where the gnosis of the heart says there are deeper energies than mind. There is the soul of the world. There's the soul of the universe. That soul is friendly. It's trying to help, but it can't help when you are full of arrogance. It can't help when you think you know best. It can't help when you've decided that your limited understanding of the universe is the most important thing. And then if we do that, we start, when we think that our understanding is the most important, we start to treat everybody according to our ideology. And this is the big danger on the planet at the moment and what we're headed into, which is the danger of the clash of ideologies. And this is why the political system needs to deeply change and be replaced by a recognition of gnosis, a recognition that what leads human beings is not mind. They consult the mind, but it's not the mind. It's not their emotions. They can be swept up by their emotions, but they're not their emotions. And it's not the fear of death of their body. The survival of our form is not the most important thing. The most important thing in the civilization to come is the human soul. And that human soul is alive in every human being. And when you call it forth, it comes. And it's coming en masse. So that's the initiation that's ahead of us. And it comes when you treat human beings as souls. And you can treat human beings as souls at any level of development of consciousness. Okay, someone doesn't need to know they're a soul in order for you to speak to their soul, because the soul is a principle that is alive in the universe. The soul is inside all things. You can talk to the soul of a mountain. You can talk to the soul of a galaxy. You can talk to the soul of a human being. When you speak as soul, soul responds. And if it can't respond consciously, like because the consciousness of the soul of what you're talking to is not there in understanding, it responds shamanically. It responds in the body or in the heart. It responds because soul recognizes soul. It's a living principle. So the awakening of the soul is not some new ideology. It's not some new way of thinking. The awakening of the soul is the revelation of that which is already there at the core of our existence. It's already there vibrating. And part of freedom is connecting with that and allowing that to unfold in the unique and true way that is there for you. If then we had a culture of freedom and love, then people wouldn't get into the polarization between power and freedom, because people's freedoms would be respected and they would be educated, they would be supported in learning how to connect with these principles in themselves, how to have gnosis be really important, which means the direct knowing through your own soul with the principles of love and freedom in the universe and in your own environment. And then from that place, any decisions that you make are already informed. They're informed by soul, because our soul is one with all souls. So when it comes down to the time ahead of us, particularly the next 2.5 years where we have Pluto and Capricorn, so we have this energy that is going to relentlessly bring up the corruption of power, its misuse in the world. It's going to bring up the financial and economic systems and everything that is underpinning the whole thing that keeps people in economic slavery in the world. It's going to bring up sex scandals, because, you know, when Pluto gets right down to the Capricorn, it gets down to the money, power, and sex. And you could say, maybe I'll go into next time, you could say that all of the sexuality stuff, Epstein and the sex slavery and so on, is that when society has lost its soul, then it seeks that. When the rich and powerful have the things that they think matters, which is money and power, and then they find that they've lost their soul, they've lost their innocence, they've lost the part of them that can vibrate with this wonder of the universe that they're in, they go seeking that. They go seeking that unconsciously, and they go seeking that in the youth. They go seeking that in the energy that's come fresh from the realms of soul and still contains its innocence and naivety. And so they buy that with money and power to try to restore some sense of soul. It's deeply tragic. And the reason it's a meme, the reason that sexuality and, you know, pedophilia and all of those things are part of the revelations of the misuse of sex and power is because they're so intimately woven together. That sex, power, and money are the forces that people will give up their soul for. They will give up knowing who they are, their direct connection through their divine child in them in order to achieve important. It's important to have power and influence connection and relationship, so to deeply lose your connection with yourself. So we live now at the end of a civilization that is deeply separated from its soul, that its dependence on its emergence into a new civilization, the most important thing, the prime directive, is the awakening of the soul. And the awakening of the soul, not just of the human being, but of all things, the recognition of the soul. So this means getting past both, you know, the survival issues around death, is there life after death or whatever, but more deeply getting past our limited perception of the world that just sees everything as resource, sees everything as part of this endless consumption to feed the disconnection from soul. And just starts to restore the wonder and the beauty of what's around us. The soul of the world is not often some other dimension. It's right around us in nature. It's around us in the vibration of our own body. It's around us in our breath. The soul of things is sweet and it's present and it's right there. It's the dream time just on the other side. But it requires that we attune to it, that we take the time to attune, and that we develop our hearts, because that's the organ. One of the deep, you know, signatures of just how dislocated we are is that in an attempt to care for everybody and look after everybody, we have this thing now, you know, it came in lockdown in New Zealand where you can't go into the bush or into nature or into the ocean. And the reason you can't is because you could get into trouble. And someone could have to come and rescue you. And so now you have to be very careful about what you do, because you could threaten somebody else. And this is part of the culture that we live in. Underneath that, if you unpack it, going to nature as friend, of course you could get diseases, or you could fall off something, or you could drown or whatever, of course. But you have the right as a human being to return to the nature that you're part of and to experience it as a friendly universe, to experience it as something that has soul, that's something that you're intelligently in relationship with. So making us afraid of our bodies, of nature, of the world around us in order to survive, to have to live in concrete boxes under fluorescent light, taking enormous drugs in order to protect our lives, has divorced us from the thing that is worth living for. The thing that brings us into life, which is our connection, our deep connection to nature, because we know our bodies breathe it in, our hearts and our consciousness breathe in the livingness of the world around us. And not only nature, but the livingness of cosmos. We live in this vibrating, beautiful, soul-filled universe. But if we lose connection with our soul, we lose our access to it. And we then fall into mind and motion and body. So the restoration of the human soul is totally tied up with the coming of new power and the coming of transpersonal power that links the lightning and the serpent together, helps our heart open, and helps us become unicorns, to become one heart together, to listen together to the heart. And then leadership will be not something that is just done by individuals. Leadership will be the recognition of what leads us, what is important to us, what manifests as important in the core of our being. So I want to conclude by saying there's something more important happening than just a debate about vaccination, about lockdown, about COVID. You know, of course, this is a great pressure cooker for everybody, and we're all responding to it in different ways. But it's part of a deeper intelligence. It's part of the soul of the world showing itself. Okay, it's showing itself through virus and disease. It's revealing, you know, corruptions in power and business and so on. But this is all just the beginning of something. It's the beginning of the revelation of our divinity. This is something beautiful that's happening to us. And of course, there are going to be many distractions. And of course, there's going to be many responsibilities as people make decisions for themselves. And those decisions affect other people and affect their families. And so instead of just being able to cruise along, we're being forced into a time of initiation. And when you're being forced into the birth canal, when you're in that process, when a civilization is in the process of birthing, it can feel incredible tension. But, you know, our job is not just to survive the birthing process, because the birthing process is a transition. It's a transition between worlds. And that transition is going to be a transition from mind to heart. And that means in order to move into new civilization, each of us has to do the work of deeply finding our own heart, growing it up, maturing it, breaking it out of its sentimentality, being willing to confront our fear of death, so that we can feel what's more important, so that we can feel our soul, the soul that has been through many lives and deaths, the soul that is connected to eternity. That soul is part of the world soul. It's part of the great soul of the earth and the soul of cosmos. And that is what's going to be at the beginning of the civilization that's coming. So the revelation of a divine power is what's going to change the world, not debate. So finding that revelation inside each of us, finding the source of our own power and listening to it, growing our capacity to listen to it, and then looking like lightning, where is it landing around us? You know, sometimes we don't see it until it appears. But if we look for it, we notice it. We start to notice where that lightning is landing in millions of people all over the planet, where revelation is happening. And we take our eyes off the porn that's around us, around our survival and what's the latest, you know, fears, and we place it in the real values. We place it back in nature. We place it in the human spirit that's responding to difficult circumstances with love and freedom. And then we nurture and water the new civilization in each of us. Okay, well, that's my rant for this morning, and I'm gonna open the field for some comments, some questions, some gnosis.
I'd like to speak if that's okay. Are you
So if you
opening
want to share, then what do they do, Winter? Raise your hand or we'll unmute you. Hey, we'll just sit in silence.
Hi, Bruce. I have a question. Karen from Connecticut. Can you hear me okay?
Hi.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay, thank you. My chest is still vibrating with what you were talking about with the lightning and the serpent and having access to the will of God and meeting the Kundalini energy. And I have a question in there and I don't know what it is, but I'm wondering if you could just speak to that marriage a little bit deeper.
Sure. Well, I would say that in a way, the lightning is response to the will of God, and the Kundalini's response to the will of the goddess. So, you know, a lot of damage has been done in the name of, you know, the will of God, but the integration of our spiritual instinct, which is the lightning, with our shamanic awareness, which is the body's deep connection to the body of the planet, then that brings a wisdom of the heart that can include the best of consciousness and the best of our knowing of our body. And I feel like for me, one of the big problems in the world that's come from patriarchy and the colonization of body by mind is that we trust the mind, but we've lost access to the deep wisdom of the body, the shamanic wisdom that's held by indigenous cultures, that's held by our own connection to the earth. So the heart integrates not just consciousness, but also shamanic awareness and understanding through our Kundalini. And so when the heart speaks, its wisdom is already informed. It's not just the ideal, it's what's informing also the intelligence from the body. So does that help? Is that really where you're going, or is there some other part of it?
It helps. I kept feeling around this lightning being this two-way portal to God's will of both receiving kind of this personal and then kind of going back up to the transpersonal and then down to serpent. And I'm kind of just still letting that marinate, but it felt very like when you said it, I could feel the revolutions of this, you know, bulldozing the personal will to make space in the vessel for this God access, and then dropping down into body, into serpent.
Right. Well, you know, one of the things that when we come alive as energy beings is that you start to listen directly. That's part of your own gnosis. How is the energy wanting to move in me? Like how are these energies, these divine powers wanting to connect in my heart? And so that's the beginning of wisdom rather than knowledge. It's a living process as you become alive. And I feel like one of the reasons people study Tantra in the world for me is not just so that they can integrate their consciousness in their body and their sexuality. It's so that they can become living vibrating channels that can listen. They can listen through the channel that they are to the earth itself and to cosmos. And that listening produces the awakening. So I feel your process happening, the living gnosis happening right now. So thank you for your question. Anybody else out there?
Bruce, kia ora, morena, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Can you update us in terms of where does that leave us in terms of Haydn and events at Haydn?
That's a very good question. We're in that conversation. I lost that last bit from you. Obviously, you were muted, but in terms of events at Haydn, we don't know. We're in the inquiry. You know, things change externally. We have to actually, as a being, as Haydn, feel into what is our deep truth. What is it that is our gnosis and our standing? How do we do what we do? How do we have freedom at the center of Haydn, which is on our stone at the core, and be true to the principle that is that the center lives for, and at the same time integrate our love and wanting to connect with other people and help them connect with what's. So it's going to be a dynamic process, and we'll keep you posted as it unfolds.
Could you take a recording and share it with us? Joke.
Oh, right, yeah.
I'd like to say something, Bruce.
Yeah.
So I'm just observing that the soul of the world, it speaks through the personal, and to have the courage to listen to that as a personality or as a human being is it means that the soul is going to manifest itself very specifically and very individually. It's not going to manifest itself in the same way for one human being as for another. And to have the courage as a human being, as an individual human being, to be able to listen to the way that the soul of the world speaks through you specifically, brings us back to the fact that we all have our own songs. We have personal songs, and we have personal ways of translating the song of the world. And that is through our own personal life. It is the way we manifest that song of the world. It is through our personal voice. And it's using our words. And how we connect into our own hearts is specific to each one of us. To have the courage to do that in our own personal way takes tremendous courage. And to have that obliterated in the face of this whole, it is these individual threads that we need to nurture. It is the fact that we all have specific individual ways of speaking about the soul of the world. Now we need to promote, and that is what I'm seeing is being lost. It's being lost in the same way that the species of the planet are being lost. It is this incredible specificity that we as human beings are not the same. We do not speak the voice of the world with the same tongue. The voice of the world, or the soul of the world, is universal, but we have specific ways of talking about it, just like we have specific languages. The earth, the world has so many languages, literal languages, but it's this specificity which is, I'm so sad that people are not able to claim that.
Yep.
That they're not owning their own voices, their own languages, their own methodologies of being able to speak their truth.
Yeah, it's a beautiful point. And in a way, that's what we're coming into now with the pressure, is that people are being pressured into bearing the consequence of their own divinity. And that's what you're saying, is that requires diversity. Of course, the soul of the world will speak through transpersonal collective movements and so on, but it can be felt by each individual. And the unpacking of your own direct relationship with divinity is the greatest work of a human being. And it is a work, right? It's a soul work. It's easier to believe, to find someone to believe or someone to follow, or it's hard to deeply listen and take responsibility for your own direct relationship with your divinity. And of course, that's what's required if we're to live in a culture where we can trust each other to have each done that work and to have done the hard work, not the easy work, but the hard work of listening, and then to show up with that listening, not trying to seek to enroll anybody else, that our way of responding is the right way, but to meet their way of responding in the incredible diversity. Then we live in a diverse, natural, living, vibrating world of human souls. So that's what we long for, right? But it does require individual responsibility, and that individual responsibility requires work. So thank you.
I'd like to be next. I'm Peter, and I just like to say that this kind of work woke me up. And I want to tell everyone that before I was involved with Tantra, I was doing something else. I was involved with politics, mostly anti-politics, anti-government type. And the whole purpose is to live in a place on the planet with no wars, no conflict, no violence. And that was my my life in the beginning. And eventually I put that in the back burner and move on. Then Tantra came along. And guess what? Tantra woke that part of me up. And once that woke up, say, hey, what if everybody love each other? No war, no crimes, no conflict. That is where I'm moving now. For me, this is my my motivation to move forward. It's going to be the next step to teach. Hopefully, this message gets across that we can use this and open up our heart to be love. And this like the motion to move forward to that everybody love. Just universal love. It's not just relation love. It's more of what I did in the past to have a global love. There's no more conflict. And we can move on with life without having to fight for something. We just take it. We earn it, we take it. It's all yours. And that is where I want to give my projection to everyone.
Thank you, Peter. Like what I hear from you saying is that when you become alive, you know, using the word Tantra, but it's like when you integrate some degree of matter and spirit inside your being, when you become alive, the desire to dominate others or to even convince others of anything starts to disappear. So people who have come alive are naturally loving and free with each other. And so this is more important probably than changing people's opinions and ideas, is to come alive. Thank you. And okay, one more.
Bruce.
Hi.
Hello. Sorry, Martin, you go ahead though. I'll meet.
Please go ahead.
Hey, Martin, good to see you.
Here we are.
As a man who knows the political arena. Yeah, you're on, Martin.
I'm sorry, I had muted myself. Yes, you know, well, of course, thanks for sharing. I wanted to convey, I have been working now in diplomacy for 10 years, more or less. and right now more involved with the United Nations and disarmament. And I still feel great pain for how slow things are. And I could say that at least from what I work, 80%, 90% of what is said in these meetings, political high-level meetings, comes from the archives, from the memory, from the mind. And the results are also from the mind. Most of the time is taking negotiating documents and, wording, exchanging one word for the other, etc. So I have doubts if our current system will make it on time. And I wanted to ask you if you have any feeling of what may come in terms of the United Nations or the G20 or some kind of group, or maybe the activation through technology, maybe changing the democracy as it is now. If you have any feeling about that. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to say how much I appreciate, your life dedicated to, I know your heart. I know why you do what you do. And it's just great to know that you're in those places of power doing what you can. And it's also heartbreaking to feel your despair in that, to feel the frustration comes by the system, and knowing that your heart that's come to help is being by greater, we all feel towards leadership. The frustration, I'm hoping that the United Nations or hoping that the League of Nations or something else will actually open themselves. But my experience is that, as you know, that until we get to our knees, until we acknowledge that there is, divine power, and not just as some religious idea of God, but as a reality in our lives. And until we have an institution like the United Nations or something that doesn't just have a meditation room, but that they get on their fucking knees every day before they go to their minds and their opinions and their lobbyists and everything, that they open their hearts to the world, like, we're not going to have leadership that we can trust and rely on. So I don't have faith that it's going to come through the structures of power that we have. I feel like they're too entrenched in everything that we know has to change. So that's why I'm putting my faith in the lightning. I'm putting faith in the millions, of initiates around the planet that are tuned in, that are coordinated in a far deeper way than our political structures and systems, and whose love and connection with each other is going to create like a yeasting culture, a new culture that will spread. So that's my hope, is for the powers to reveal themselves outside our existing structures. And having said that, the fact that people like you are inside those structures, lifting your leader, your plasma into the lightning is beautiful. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's part of how it will change. It will change from people inside the system and outside the system doing what they can and speaking up for the truth that's living in them. So it's so good to see you and feel you. And it feels like there's no distance and space between us in those deep, deep worlds. Okay.
Hey, Bruce.
Hi.
Yeah, what a privilege. I'm joining you from the UK, and hello, Earthling tribe that are here in this container. It's awesome. I have faith, Bruce, in us. I know, I have faith in all of us, not just hope and faith, because, we're here, we're doing it, we're doing the work, we're talking about it. And just to be in community as a collective thinking about this stuff feels right, and feels like a rich and potent space. You're talking about that catalyst for change, what's that yeast that's going to come and do it. And how can we create a container and be a channel for it? But you're doing it. You've created a container here and channeled your truth through, and other people have joined you in community to support and share that, which is just wonderful. And it's happened across tribes and nations. You know, I'm across the sea from you guys, and across our professional positions and across our generations. So it feels like a blessing, and thank you for just being here and holding this space. So you asked for a question, and I sat in my self and gnosis and thought, what would I ask Bruce? Do I have anything to ask Bruce? And I thought what I would ask is something personal. Shelley talked about that polarity between the personal and the collective, and how uniting these polarities or paradoxes is quite a thing right now. And I was going to ask something personal. I was going to say, you know, you came and shared something with us in order to support us as a collective in moving forwards. And given that we've turned up in community with you, I'm going to ask from my soul to yours, what support is your soul seeking in these current circumstances in order to better benefit and be a blessing to yourself and to all? You know, what is your soul yearning for right now that would be helpful and healing?
Yeah, I feel my soul has been strongly in the transpersonal in my life. Like, I feel like I consciously know that I'm incarnate now at this time and change of worlds, and so a lot of my life has been quite deeply dedicated into the collective, and the consequences of that personally have meant you know, a lot of not time with my children and grandchildren, not time with my aging parents, not time to go into nature and swim in the ocean that I love, you know, like, so I think the thing that is most important for me is feeling the collective acceptance of our transpersonal responsibility, like as other souls come awake and alive on the planet, as they stand for the things that are important, then a part of me like starts to relax a little of the collective tension and responsibility that we hold, you know. So even though I would love to live the new world now, I feel like because we're still in transition, it's tension time, and I'm showing up in ways that sometimes cost deeply the personal, and then that starts to impact my power to deliver in the transpersonal. So for me, what I most need actually is time of relaxation and spending time with personal love, so that my transpersonal work can continue to flower. And you know, that's my gnosis. Other people's are different, but thank you for asking. Right. Well, thank you all for, like, part of this process is already got within it some of the solutions, which is connecting with people around the world where you have resonance, where your heart feels their heart, and listening together, bringing our gnosis together with other people's, and becoming like a satellite dish to receive some more of what the world soul has to give. So thank you for showing up, whether you're silent or spoke, or in whatever position you have on the current political spectrum. Thank you for developing your gnosis.